Just so you know, we're Zooming, so you're, I don't know if this is working, Betsy. Hello, hello? Thank God. I was worried. Number 8. I'm okay with it. Okay, we are streaming. I'll call the Board of Selectmen budget meeting to order at 7, and this is the joint meeting with the Board of Finance. Can we have the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this has been kind of a challenging year for the budget. We have a relatively flat grand list, and it's a little bit tight to get this done. Dan, who wants to come up first? Public Works. You want Public Works? Yeah. Okay.
Your call.
TPO, relatively flat increase of 1.15%. Nothing really major that is driving it up. The full-time salaries are contractual, so that's based on our contract with the Teamsters. Anything that you guys want to talk about TPO?
It went up $2,000, I think, in operating for, that's a lot of vehicle expenses. Just cost of parts has went up quite a bit.
Any questions from Board of? John?
If you anticipate spending $83,000 by the end of the year, for the year, can you chat about the $99,000 for next year if you only needed 82 this year?
The flood this year slowed everything down. So the flood slowed us down. We were working on bringing everything back, so you're going to see that through a lot of our budgets this year. But we are coming into our busier point right now on the parks, so we will spend a good bit of it, I think, through the spring.
Early on, the parks
Thank you.
will eat up a lot of this. Town properties outside. Any other questions? Tim?
Yeah, I noticed somewhere in the budget, I'm not sure if it's in TPO or infrastructure, an expense item for gravel in the parking lots.
That's either in roads or in infrastructure. Tim, it's probably in infrastructure.
Okay, well, I know they've been looking for it for a few years now, and the gravel and Settlers, pretty much any of the parks, I don't know if they've,
Settlers was done last year, and so was Ewald, was done last year.
okay.
Okay. What's up next?
TPI?
Sure.
TPI, a 5.7% increase, probably basically inflationary, correct, Al? Basically just the cost of everything is going up this year, just to maintain the buildings, the cost of supplies and things like that.
Any questions from the board? We're okay with town properties. Tom, you have a question? Tom Connors looked like you were.
So the biggest percentage increase seems to come from the salaries, right?
Yeah, salary.
So
overtime.
that's a little bit different story than operating expenses, isn't it?
Yeah, so salaries partially is Teamster contract, and and we've also, we're adding, we changed the focus, if you guys remember last year in this department, we went to building a team rather than using outside contracted labor. So this is part of the building out the team as well. So we added on our inside facilities, I guess the people that would do and clean the buildings, we added 2 part-timers, so we added extra hours in there to cover, because we're eliminating the contract with the cleaning service for Town Hall Senior Center and the library and PD.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any questions? What's up next?
Transfer station?
Sounds good to us, Tim.
Transfer station, pretty flat, 0.14 increase. Again, salaries is 2.5 is the Teamsters contract. Fuel went down as we negotiated the price of gas and diesel for this year. We got a better rate this year than we were paying last year. Demo hauling went down, and I think, Matt, you can talk about that because it's been going down substantially. But as you can see, the other haulings are pretty flat, recycling and hauling. But demo hauling did go down considerably.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we went over in demo hauling. We suspect because of issues enforcing the fees, but over the last year, we really cracked down on enforcing those fees, so now we're seeing a lot less demo tonnage coming through.
Could I ask you to talk about, in both the demolition hauling and the hauling itself, the unit rates, the contracts we have, how long they last, what the rates have changed, that's one part, and also the volumes, the historic trend of the volumes and what you're planning for next year?
Yep, so this is MSW hauling. Our contract is with Wheelabrator in Bridgeport, which is a waste-to-energy facility. That's good for the next 5 years. That goes up between 4% and 6% a year, depending on inflation. Our hauling contract to Wheelabrator is with H.I. Stone and Son, and that goes up 2% each year, or inflation, whichever is less.
So, but one of them went up 6%, right? This year, was that in line with inflation? Like if you could,
The top line is the contract with Wheelabrator.
right, and that went up 6% this year, right?
Can you hold on that slide for just a second? This would indicate the, let's see, the current budget is 2,700 tons or whatever, and the new budget is 2,900. And the rate is $5 more, which is the 6% you
Right.
talked about. Explain to me why do we expect to get more stuff to haul?
Our hauling each year tends to vary up and down between 5% above current year, so that's what that is for next year's.
Well, I got a great idea. Why don't we pretend next year it goes down 5% for 2,500?
Okay.
No. Seriously, where'd you come up with a number? Do you have a 5-year history of what the units are? and-
Yeah, we track all our MSW single stream recycling.
Are you
and
saying
demo.
that the 2,720 is low relative to the average?
It's pretty much average over the last 3 years. We can only use the last 3 years because that's after we banned commercial haulers from coming to the transfer station. So it's just a slight increase from that.
Is there
average.
a
Well-
trend in the last 3 years?
It's flat.
If you look at, Betsy, if you hit the historical tab.
Sorry, this one?
Yep. So if you go up the hauling,
That's money. That's,
that's money, that's.
that's an
That's-
amalgam
that's
of
net-
both
that's
rates
what-
and units.
Yeah,
I'm
we're-
what we
yeah.
spent.
focused on the units.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last 3 years for MSW hauling has been flat since we eliminated.
If the trend is flat, why
Why
do we
we,
go
yeah,
up
why
10%
it
in
increase?
estimated units?
I mean, it fluctuates a couple percent. It's not a huge change either way.
Why not, but why project increase?
I'd ask you to look at that, you know, 10%, almost a 10% increase in units with a flat history in 3 years. I don't get it.
I think what he said with the flat history was because we were,
2 years ago, we stopped commercial haulers from coming to
stopped
the
the
transfer
commercial
station. So
haulers.
you'll see a big dip there, so you can't really see a trend yet. You can just see, last year to prior, but that's not really, it's flat, but only because we did stop commercial haulers. I wouldn't suggest going down 5% because, like everything, nothing's going down.
I,
So I would suggest, it's not, in relative terms of this budget being flat, I wouldn't suggest making any change there.
in the past, we did have a hauling one budget that was reduced, and then we had to, it did go over and we had to fill it. So because we stopped the commercial haulers from coming in, there's no real trend on that yet.
Well, I get that, but why increase it?
Why increase it,
Yeah.
the unit?
I mean,
It's just a question and
This is like budgetings and estimates, so if our guys at the transfer station are thinking that they're gonna be getting more coming in this year, then that's why we would go up, and going up 5 is not, in my opinion, a huge number. And Matt, your opinion and the trends, you could see that,
right.
we're
there's-
gonna probably go up slightly.
It's difficult to tell what private haulers will do. They've raised their rates pretty significantly every year, so we could see more people coming to the transfer station and using it instead of their private haulers.
And also, don't forget, there's still people cleaning out from the storm, so we're still getting stuff at the transfer station.
Jason?
Not to belabor the point, but would it be easier if there is a volume metric, the trends wherever you're seeing them, to share it with us? So, we may all look at that same document and be like, oh, he's 100% right, it is going to go up to 2920. But rather than speak in kind of generalities, is there opportunity to furnish us with whatever documents you're seeing that show these trends, so we can make, maybe a better estimate that either your number's right on, or we're probably not going to go down 5%, but, maybe we're flat or up 3 instead of up this, But I would
Yeah.
recommend maybe if we can get that document, that might make it a little clearer for us.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And like Dan said, we've only got 2 years, so it's tough to generalize a trend from that, but sure, we can provide that data.
Even if it's not necessarily Southbury's trends, but maybe there's some kind of general market index that shows in towns like in our size, this is what we see generally.
Yep.
Thank you.
And there's the assumption in here is that the food waste is going to stay with, costs are going to stay with Sustainable Southbury this year? Is there any kind of projection for food waste part of this?
For,
We haven't done that, Tom, because Sustainable Southbury was supposed to put together a report to let us know what their feeling is right now. We haven't received that yet.
Okay, well, I guess the thought was that I thought we split that in 2 pieces, like Sustainable Southbury is putting a report together about how to get rid of the hauling if we can, and what the investment would take. But I thought you guys were gonna do a big part of it about investigating, again, what a food waste projection would cost? And I guess if you haven't done it, I know you've been busy,
Well, we-
but you know, again, the sort of working agreement I thought was that you guys were gonna take on the part of looking on with a hauling kind of situation.
We did look at it, and I believe it's gonna be about $22,000 just to set it up at the transfer station. That's not even counting the hauling piece of it, which right now the hauling is I believe 110 for food scraps, and we're only paying 90 for MSW. So
Okay,
that's kind of where we're at right now.
okay.
I read an article in the paper in Woodbury. They believe they have great success with the food program, and the article indicated, I don't trust everything you read in the paper. The article indicated there was a significant reduction in the weight of regular hauling. But then they had to deal with all the food thing on the other side. How does your, 8% increase relate to what you are thinking you might do with food scraps next year or not?
We do have a baseline number for just hauling of the food scraps. If the town were to take that part on with the current system, that would be about $6,000 to $8,000 a year just for the hauling, not including providing residents with bags or kits or any infrastructure improvements, such as fencing that we might need. But that $6,000 to $8,000 is not reflected in the current budget.
And surprisingly, when we looked at this last year, which was shocking, I think, to everyone, we didn't notice a decrease in our MSW. Actually, there was an increase during the period that we were taking in food scraps. It's unexplainable because you would think it would have come down, but it didn't.
Which an
Yeah.
explanation of that could be that people bringing food scraps in chose to bring their MSW there also instead of, throwing it out at, maybe a private hauler.
Yeah, I mean, that's one explanation. I mean, the other point, though, about this, I thought would be, Woodbury basically went pay to throw, correct? And I guess we don't want to do that. But another explanation is Woodbury went pay to throw, and we don't do very good monitoring at I don't think at our thing, and a lot of people came from Woodbury and go to our transfer station. So the other thing I'm concerned about is whether we're really monitoring very well for who's using the transfer station.
I also believe Woodbury's transfer station is outsourced. It's not run by their public works department.
No.
It's run by an outsourced company,
Right.
which would make it easier to have the people to follow up on that.
Yeah, that too. But I think one of the reasons why Woodbury got a reduction is they did pay to throw, right? But if they do pay to throw and we're easy, then that's another explanation why we get more people, right? Because Woodbury people come here and they give us their trash, right? But we don't really have the apparatus, I think, to track it very well. We do kind of ad hoc tracking, but, I don't know that we really track it maybe as well as we could.
Tom, we review each user of the transfer station for proper permit to do such. And what you see here in some of these reductions is because we've stepped up our monitoring procedure there.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say that you have people from outside using the transfer station. I feel the otherwise, that we're
Okay.
reviewing everybody's credentials as they come in.
All right. Do we have any appetite for pay to throw?
I don't think for tonight that's the
Okay.
topic of discussion. That would take quite a bit of,
Should we invite Mr. Hill on that discussion,
you
Tom?
would be here all night. I do know that the people of Southbury in the past have adamantly opposed pay to throw.
Okay.
I think it's something we should look at. All options, including outsourcing the transfer station. Blake and I had a couple of discussions about it, but
Yeah, Matt, maybe,
that's a future.
sorry, Dan, but
That's okay.
maybe just share the 6-month tonnage total that we've seen over the last 6 months.
For food scraps,
Yes.
it's about, it's 22.4 tons in the last 6 months, which is 1.5% of total MSW.
So that's it, team. You're generating about 44 tons of food scrap and you're shipping it out at approximately the same cost as your solid waste. That's a fact.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. And I think that's really based mostly on Sustainable Southbury doing what it did. I mean, the estimate, the broader estimate is that 20% of the total waste would be food scraps. We're getting like 1% of it right now. So again, the question would be, do we want to put more effort into a program for that? But from a financial perspective, like you said, it's maybe a wash, okay, unless we can do it better, right? And so the question about that is whether there's a better way to deal with the food scraps that's less costly, I guess, from a financial perspective.
Okay, anybody else?
I mean, I guess there's also a question about, is there a better way to encourage people to have less waste, to use the transfer station less?
Yeah, we certainly agree with the initiative, and a lot of brainstorming needs to happen in the future about, what other advantageous ways there are to get rid of what is food scrap. A farmer, for example, that takes food scrap would be a much
Yeah, well.
more cost-effective approach than shipping it out at
No,
around
yeah,
$100.
I agree about the food scrap thing. I'm just saying, how about waste more generally? Like, is there something we can do in terms of campaign to try to, encourage people to use less waste generally, or use the transfer station less, one or the other, I guess. But have we thought about that at all, or just that's above and beyond probably what you got to do on a daily basis?
I think it's a good question. I think that's a team effort on changing people's habits at home.
Mhm.
I don't have an answer for you on any more
Okay.
than that.
All right, yeah, okay.
Comment on the food scraps. I've spoken to Chuck Liddy regarding it, and I think many people in this town have land and they compost their own food waste. And I think for the town to spend money on food waste, when people can compost it on their own, there should be programs that enable people to do it at home and show them how to do it properly, than having taxpayers pay for food scrap program.
It's broken. I broke it, Mike. I think that the food scraps program isn't, I compost at home, and most of the people do compost, a lot of people I do know compost at home, but there's a lot of people, for instance, Heritage Village and other places, that can't compost at home. So the real food scrap program is not based so much on trying to target people to do food scraps when they can compost at home. It's targeted at the people that can't do that, particularly like Heritage Villagers, and some of the other communities where they're not allowed to compost at home, really.
One thing we may want to look at is, rather than doing composting, which is, I'm all for if it's going to, reduce the MSW, but looking at other recycling, streams like bottles and cans and things like that, we could actually, the town can actually have a revenue offset on that.
Okay. John?
Could we go back to TPI for just a second? I'm remembering Dan explained that last year we added two folks, and we were going to save money on the cleaning service. And the nature of the quality and the skill set of the people we were going to be adding were such that we could save money elsewhere. And by adding the two people, well, we spent, $103,000 on full-time salaries, and then we added $140,000, it looks like. Did we save $140,000 in the cleaning contract? And where in here would we show that we saved the difference, I guess, in doing stuff, whatever they would do? Can you talk about that, please?
Sure. So facilities The team has been getting built out over the last year. Very strong, group of gentlemen. John, we were successful in dissolving the custodial contracts under the operating contracts line last year, which is what we had moved over to that salaries line. And a lot more to come. We've been orienting in facilities, onboarding a few new team members. And unfortunately, kind of during the orientation of these new employees is when we went through August 18th also, which drastically changed a lot of our operations in the buildings and added a lot of weight to some of our staff. But we do still intend to keep bringing down service contract numbers and doing more work in-house over time.
And I think we'll see a lot of that, Blake, as we start rebuilding the library. We'll start seeing a lot of that in there,
That's right. It's absolutely right.
Thank you. We'll talk about it again next year.
Glad to.
What's next, Dan?
Last one is highway. Highway, we are 3.24% increase. Major increases is MS4 sampling, which is a state requirement, streetscape maintenance, and rental equipment. So Matt, you want to touch on MS4? Because I think we talk about it, but you probably have a better handle than I do.
Sure. So MS4, in case anyone's unfamiliar with it, is basically what the state requires us to do to better manage our stormwater. Best management practices like reducing illicit discharge, reducing directly connected impervious area, which is basically increasing sheet flow off of our roads. So next year's budget request reflects some of the requirements that the state has for us in this year of our MS4 permit. The majority of that is to start developing a stormwater retrofit plan, which ties into the reduction of DCIA that I just mentioned. Our consultant will start working on design to first identify sites that can have sheet flow increased and DCIA reduced, and then start working on designs for those sites as to what we can do next time we redo those roads to, like, eliminate curb and catch basins, construct detention basins, infiltration basins, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it is with our on-call. We use our on-call engineers for that contract as well. Equipment rental. Tom, I think this is the crusher.
So equipment rental, we went up 15,000. We're looking to rent a crusher to clean up our yard on top. So we're looking to do it over a few-year period instead of doing it all at once. So we're looking at probably 5 years of crushing and then trying to keep up with it on our own, instead of going out to a large contract and doing it all at once.
Will you be able to use the crushed stone that?
Correct.
on
It'll be
your
like a
roads and-
recycling program. We'll use that in our drainage program for backfilling.
So will that
and stuff.
save money to offset that
Um,
somewhat?
It's probably not
Not-
that much product when we crush it, but it'll be a little bit, so there'll be a slight savings. Just kind of recycling what we have in our yard. There'll be more topsoil than anything else, so that'll go to the parks
Yeah.
and
No, that's not.
The trouble
That's
with
not the
the,
rental. That's,
with the pi, is it comes in. It's got to go out at some time to make room. So, best thing to do is to process it and use it as much as you can.
61014.
Otherwise, you just have to dispose of it
It's the one next to that one you're on.
wherever, like a fill someplace, and that's a
Yep.
little, there's not too many places you can fill like that.
No?
My thinking is that if you're crushing it and you're using it, it's
Oh, it's
offsetting
on
the
the roll.
cost of other things that you would need to use for certain areas, whether it be gullies or things like that.
correct, it
So
will
it would be a
offset.
little bit offset.
It'll offset, probably if you go to our drainage line, but it'll most be capital line, where we use a lot of riprap to shore up the sides of roads.
So
So,
it might help as a base before you
Yep.
put the riprap in.
yep, we'll probably crush it to 3-inch minus. So
There it is,
you'll
John.
be able to use
went
along
from
roadsides
15 to
where they're
30.
washed out and stuff like that. We can just use our own product.
That's my fault.
We're going to attempt to do some better sorting before it comes in, so the material's a little bit more sorted out. Right now, it's just all comes in as one piece. Then you have to separate, you don't get as good a material. So attempt from the jobs to try and separate out before they, and maybe not bring all of that material back to the yard, but use it on site instead of bringing it back. But they've got a huge pile of material over there. It's got to be processed. Jason?
Continuing on the crusher, so it's, you had said to me about a 15 grand delta over the next 5 years?
It's 30,000, give or take a little bit. We had 15,000 in already, so we only increased it 15. That gives us about a 2-week rental for the unit.
And that number would stay flat for the next 5 years, or we don't know?
The rental's gonna go up, I'm sure, every year. That's where it is this year. I don't expect it to go up that much every year.
And you had said doing it this way most likely saves money instead of renting it once for a longer term for one job. Do you know the order of magnitude, the number difference?
I think we got some prices around $100,000 to crush, contracted out. This we're gonna do in-house.
Mhm.
And it's a continuous process. I mean, we're bringing in material every time we replace a pipe on a road, so it doesn't stop. I mean, we're bringing in new material, bringing out material. So we're hoping to get through it in, I would say, 5 years it'll take us, because that's all our labor too.
Thank you.
Okay,
Streetscape maintenance? It's the other one we had,
Streetscape,
that's sidewalks.
right, it was an increase in sidewalks repair. We have quite a few portions of the sidewalk we're gonna need to cut up and replace. So we're hoping to increase that this year with using our own workforce to replace some of the sidewalks.
okay, what else do we have?
That's it for these guys, unless you guys want to preview roads.
What do you want to bring up next, the roads?
Roads? So bridges, as everyone knows, is more of a reserve program, so we put in, we started at 250 and we increased 5% a year, so we're at 260, 2.5 this year, but in that reserve right now, we have about $2 million. We're doing the Oldfield Bridge, which is 50/50 to the state, and then the year after that is the big one, which is the 2-lane bridge over Poverty Road. So that will be, that's 100% funded by the state. How much was that grant? Blake, about $9 million we got?
Yeah, it's close to a
It's
$10
about a $9
million
million
project.
grant from the federal government. The only thing we'll need for that is about $1 million a month, because we upfront the money, and then they reimburse us. Roads, we went up the roads this year we are looking at, and these are all based upon FEMA. We're still working on FEMA to see where they're gonna work with us as well on some of these roads and culverts. Blake and his team went out with the FEMA team last week to do a drive around so they can inspect all of the work. So we're waiting to hear from them, so there's still more to come on that. The green is the ones that we put in for FEMA to come in and kind of take a look at it and see if they will give us a 75-25 funding. The yellow are items that, in working with Tom, are items that we probably will offset future years' budgets, that we will zero out because the work is already completed on those particular projects. Sure. If you scroll down, Betsy, you could see it on the bottom there, the 157, 938, that's the total of all of those items that we have in the maintenance schedule. So if you see on the bottom, 793, 615 is debt service storm event. That is Bucks Hill Road that FEMA toured, and we're gonna see if FEMA will reimburse us for that, and that's why we're actually reducing it from there, but we're putting it in our debt service budget. You'll see a line of debt service for that.
So what, explain that to me a second?
So what we're putting together is a debt service package for the roads and culverts and the projects that FEMA's gonna reimburse us for.
Yes.
So Bucks Hill Road, if you scroll up a little bit, Betsy, sorry. Up to the top. So you see Bucks Hill Road, it's in green, it's 793, 615. That's one of the roads that was damaged by the storm.
Right.
So we're hoping that FEMA will come in and reimburse us for that. But to front the project, because FEMA's a reimbursement program, we were thinking about borrowing the funds on a short-term note
Okay.
to then offset that in the budget, because it's actually in the debt service line as well.
Right, and so is this whole budget include any assumptions about FEMA?
The only one on this line is the Bucks Hill Road in the roads. The rest of the roads that are an assumption of FEMA are out future years.
Okay, but, so right now, we're putting in the budget what it costs to do it, right? And we're not assuming yet any FEMA, when FEMA's coming back on it, or? net or gross
We're
of
not
FEMA?
assuming anything until we hear from FEMA, but we did put it in our debt service schedule.
Okay,
Because no matter what we do, we have to lay the money out first.
well, I agree with that, just wanted to see if there's any offset from FEMA built into the budget.
We don't have any right yet, Tom, because FEMA came around and they toured, and we still haven't gotten their full, complete inventory on what they would and will not. That's not to say FEMA could come in and say, hey, for Bucks Hill, we're only gonna reimburse you $250,000. We don't know yet. Until we
Okay.
know that, we put the road in as what it would be, and then we put it in debt service.
Okay, so that would mean that we kind of might get pleasant surprises from FEMA, but we're not planning for it, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
What's the next one?
That's it? That's it for Public Works?
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Oh, tree warden, sorry. Is that in there, tree warden? Sorry, my fault, Tom. Tree warden actually went down because of the
Hey, you gotta take a lap when you can take a lap, okay?
Tom worked a long time on this one, and this is the ash. Go ahead, Tom. The ash treatment is every 2 years, so this is not the year that we have it in the budget, so it'll be in next year.
And possibly, talking with the tree warden, there's potential that it's maybe just time to stop doing that treatment. If they can't make it at this point, the trees, we should consider moving on. So, that may not go back in here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So Ann, Tim, Jason, Justin, Jeff. We're missing, no, Ann and, Holly, Holly Solomon. Sorry. So what do we want to do next? Andrew,
What?
you wanna?
Andrew,
No,
you wanna come up?
Andrea,
Here, this one here, here's the, you can sit right here. Here's department head. Andrea is our Senior Services Director. I don't know if everybody has met Andrea before. Her first budget meeting here.
Second.
Second? Oh,
But the
sorry.
other one was only 3 weeks in, so I didn't do the budget, Dan did.
Oh, three.
First real one.
First real one, okay. I stand corrected. It's always good to correct your boss while you're here. It's always good.
so if you guys had a chance to look at the senior budget and the park and rec budget, you might see some considerable increases in their activities lines and their part-time salaries lines. What we discovered is we have some funds that were set up for both senior services and park and rec to try new programs. And the rule was if the programs are successful after a year, they were supposed to roll to the general fund. So this year, we're rolling all those programs to the general fund, but you'll also see a revenue offset. So there is revenue with those lines as well. So you will see a revenue offset in the revenue to make up the difference in the increase in their budget.
Any of these in here will be the 3-year already, or no? These are just trial,
No, all of these were trial, they're successful, and now they're in the general fund budget. So
So
Andrew's
that's-
gone up 13%, and that's the majority of it is you'll see a revenue offset of pretty much the same amount. One other thing we did discover is in our dial-a-ride, for many, many years, we were reducing dial-a-ride by the state grant, and we were counting it in our revenue line as well. So this year, we decided we were not going to do that. We were just, because we did that, because when we do our budget for the state for dial-a-ride, we have to show the grant coming in. But we can develop a P&L without having it in this budget and send it to the state, so we actually took it out.
I had a couple questions about the capital requests. It looked like there was a huge jump between a gas stove and a electric stove. What happened to the oven?
So the one we have right now is an electric stove. It's still somewhat functioning, but we're having a few issues with it.
Okay, so it's a replacement?
It'd be a replacement, right?
Okay.
And we moved this to infrastructure because the actual stove replacement is in the infrastructure plan.
Oh, it is, okay.
It's not the, believe it or not the commercial electric, though, the commercial gas is in the infrastructure plan, so
The floor and the paint
Mhm.
also,
that's also in infrastructure.
is Public Works doing that work?
They will do some of it and outsource some of it.
Okay.
John?
Andrea, could you explain us how the various food programs work at the senior center? Do we have chefs? Do people pay? Is stuff brought in from the outside? How does it all work?
Sure. So we have our program called Let's Do Lunch, which is typically held on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It is co-sponsored with Heritage Deli here in Southbury. So they prep and cater all of our food, and they charge us $5 per meal, and we charge the seniors $5 per meal. It's all run by volunteers, and
Meals are pretty good.
they're very good.
John, for $5, you may want to join the senior center.
So we did go down just because this was the first year that we did it, and I kind of overshot it a bit. The deal we have with the deli is 30 people for the lunch, and we now average about 15 to 25. So the first budget we did last year, I expected the 30, but I brought it down a bit. And then some special events and holidays and stuff would change the schedule, so we don't have it every single Tuesday and Thursday. So I brought it down a little bit for this year.
So it is fully planned to be fully offset by revenues because the seniors pay what the cost is. Okay, thank
Correct.
you.
One thing that we did add on Jeff's line here is Jeff met with the Waterbury Meals on Wheels, and for years, we didn't do anything with that because there was, the records were not kept as what we would have liked, but they do have a new CFO there, and we thought it might have been a good opportunity to put it in the budget this year because they are accounting for every meal that they're giving to Southbury residents now. So that's, you'll see on the main sheet, there's a 6487 added on Jeff's line. Jeff met with them, and we thought it was a good idea to put it in the budget.
So I was approached by the
Yeah.
group. Prior years, their accounting was so difficult it made absolutely no sense, so we stopped contributing to them. But they've approached us, they've got, things are supposed to be under control, they know what they're doing, so I added on my side, I added, it was too late for her to add it anyway.
And I believe it was 50 cents a meal is what they charge?
Yeah, it's pretty,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's-
and it's for people who can't get out.
One is meals that we do in the senior center, and the other one is meals that are delivered to the homes.
I understand that. Are these dinner meals and the other ones are lunch meals, or how do the two programs, how are they going to coordinate?
So the Let's Do Lunch is a on-site lunch program. It's all sorts of things from sandwiches and soups to chicken marsala and rice and veggies. It really varies. Whereas Meals on Wheels is a packaged, microwavable sort of meal that gets delivered to the resident's home.
To the resident's home as opposed to the, okay,
Right.
thank
So
you.
the idea of doing the meals at the senior centers to get socialization by the seniors, so they come in and visit with, it's not just about the meal, it's about making sure they're out, active, and social.
Correct.
Or not? Is it financially, they work the same? Like, in other words, does
Think-
somebody offset the cost of the Meals on Wheels or not?
The Meals on Wheels
It's a
vary.
donation, right?
I think it's a
it's a
sliding
It's a
donation.
scale.
donation,
Yeah.
Meals on Wheels.
Okay,
Does
so
that-
what's the, so we are paying, you're paying for the Meals on Wheels, is that right?
It's a donation, it's a contribution that's made to the group in Waterbury that runs the Meals on Wheels from the town. It's not based on per meal. It's based on per meal, but it's not a charge. If we
There-
chose not to participate, they would still deliver the Meals on Wheels, but I don't think that's quite right. As long as their accounting is more accurate than what it was.
Do the recipients go through social services? Is that how?
I think the Meals
get
on
on that
Wheels is
list, or-
through it's a reference by our social services and through Western Connecticut Area on Aging.
Yes, for new opportunities.
Just a quick question, how was that $6,400 as a donation? Is it per meal? And if more meals are being given out in town, then the price goes up? Or is that
It's-
what we choose to give them?
No, it's 6,120 meals the town pays $1.06 per meal.
Okay, and if that increases, then we have. we pay
Yes.
more. Okay.
And it's actually
Really, that
53.
donation we're paying for.
53 residents that actually get the meals in Southbury, and it's 6,120 meals over the year.
I can assure you, I have helped deliver a few of those meals. It's it's needed. It's not something you would aspire to save money by having them give you a free meal.
What I'm saying is, if we have more people that are in need,
Yeah.
and we find out they're in need, our price is gonna increase.
For-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for this budget cycle, no, but next budget, they will come back to us and say, yes, it will increase by whatever the additional people would be.
Which is fine, I just wanna make sure that
Yep.
we're getting everybody, we're reaching out to everybody.
They operate off of grants and government funding, but it doesn't cover everything. So I almost want to say it's partially an offset to the cost to them. But we want to make sure we keep up as much of our end of it as we can for these people. It also gives, frankly, it also gives a contact point for them with a senior. They knock on the door. If nobody's answering, they're not supposed to leave the meal.
So we don't do the economy.
But then they also, if they know, they'll do a well check. So there's also another side to it's a check on our seniors who are at home. Anything else? Anything else for Andrea? Wow, aren't you excited?
Not too bad.
Okay,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you for your work.
Hey, Mark, you want to come up? It's like the price is right. No change in building other than code books. Hey, Mark, you can talk about, that we were looking for another set of code books because the code changes, and you can probably talk on that.
They tell us it's gonna change this year, so we have to be ready for it.
Yeah, $400. And you didn't put a helicopter in this year, so that was a good thing.
Piece by piece now, Dan, I got it figured out.
Wrote it this year, and, it's good.
You might wanna scrutinize Steve's budget, Derek's budget, and my budget, piece by piece.
I'm not saying anything. But if you get a helicopter, go for it.
If I might, your function is a service function.
Yeah.
To keep economic development moving and homeowners constant on their projects. Do we have any data as to how timely we are, how responsive we are? I haven't heard any complaints. I'm
Yeah,
not,
no.
I'm not going anywhere with
No,
this.
we don't have
'cause-
anything like that. There's really no way to do it. Only because, John, if you pulled a permit and called me tomorrow for a footing, we may or may not be able to get you.
Yeah,
But if you called Thursday, yeah, I can get you tomorrow. It's just a matter of who's scheduled before you. But I know we're faster than most. I just know that. I've heard other contractors come in and what takes me 2 weeks is taking months in other towns that are very close to ours.
we've had problems with the health district in the past with non-responsiveness, and we hear about it. And because we haven't heard anything about lateness or slowness in your department, I guess we assume it's working well, Jeff.
Oddly enough, by chance, I had a conversation with someone on my road who had moved in. They've built a beautiful house. They've been there for quite a while, but they were out by the road. And this gentleman was in the trades in electrical, and he spoke, I didn't want to tell Mark this, but he spoke very highly of Mark and our building department, and how well it was easy to get his house built, and how they made, during COVID especially, efforts to get out there and get it inspected. So I have not heard any complaints about the times it takes to get things inspected.
If I could just say, I've had dealings with Mark and his department, and I've had dealings with other departments elsewhere, and yours is top-notch.
Well,
You get it done
appreciate
really
that.
quick, and in a very friendly manner, which I find very refreshing.
I had a good trainer.
And our building permits are exceeding even what we budgeted this year so far, and we have 4 months still to go. So I mean, Mark's group is killing it.
And
So
and to
helicopter maybe.
Mark's credit, even he got into the 21st century. He was
They're kicking and screaming.
kicking and screaming, Mark was, but
We can get you a tire this year, Mark, and then move from there.
Not yet.
Mark, I have a quick question about salary. I'm not mad at this budget at all. I just am trying to understand the salary for the department head, because I noticed something similar in EDC too. How did it get from almost 92 to an amended almost 98 to the year-to-date actual 64, but the ask is back up to 98?
Sure. That was to make up for the overtime that I don't get anymore.
Yeah, there's two reasons that happens, is when we do our budget, we don't include raises in the budget because of our collective bargaining units.
Okay.
So our approved budget and our amended budget will be different by the percentage of the raises this year. So that was a 3% increase this year on everyone's line. And then for Mark this year, we made him an exempt employee because technically he is an exempt employee. He supervises people, everything that falls under there. So in doing so, we had to calculate the difference in what he was getting in his overtime pay and his actual salary. And it was a slight difference up on top of the 3% raise.
Okay, thank you.
anything else for Mark? See, if you were hourly, you wouldn't be here tonight.
Yeah, it would. You call, we show up.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Megan, you want to be next? I don't know if everyone has got to meet Megan yet, but she is our new Park and Rec Director. This is Megan's first municipal budget, so I would say she's done a pretty good job. I mean, she was here shortly when we dumped it on her, and I always say to the finance office, I feel bad, because it feels like every time Megan comes in, we feel like we beat her up a little bit, but she's been doing a good job, and she's always happy when she comes in, so.
Okay,
Extra revenue, same as Park and Rec. We also shifted some things, so we used to have our activities and part-time salaries. To get a truer salary picture, we moved the things that were in activities out of part-time salaries, moved it to activities, and then we shifted the items that were successful in what we call Fund 760 with the trial programs and moved them to the general fund. But there is also a revenue offset to capture the difference in the increase here as well.
So if we subtract the 68,000 from the 134, getting, what's that, $66,000, there's an additional $66,000 in revenue this year over last, or more?
Yep,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if we look at the budget just based on, John had finance office do a little, kind of just a little different project to the budget this year. Megan's increase is 9.24%, but if you take the revenue offset, it's actually down 15% because of the additional revenue we're gonna get in these programs.
Just so I understand this. For each activity, say, does that pay for, do the incoming fees pay for the activity plus?
So, some pay plus and some are flat, depending upon the activity that we do.
It's
But-
not designed to make money, but it's an estimate on what to cover the cost. Sometimes it's above the cost, and sometimes it's break even.
No, and that makes sense. Otherwise, we'd just say make 1 million programs and it'll
Yeah.
pay for the whole town. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, because when I first looked at it, before I understood the revenue offset, it looked like there was a ton of activities. Understanding that they essentially pay for themselves, what are the metrics you use when you decide this is a worthwhile activity or not, when you're kind of planning your programming?
I guess the enrollment numbers would play a role. in
So
how
you
many
know ahead
people
of
we
time
get.
that, hey, you'll put out something, hey, we're having, I think I saw, a golf program in there, and 20 kids raise their hand, that's a worthwhile program?
Yep, and we also have minimums, so if we're not meeting the minimum, then we'll cancel the program. And every program has a different minimum number.
I'll give you an example, Jason. Megan came to us this year and said we'd like to do a bus trip to Radio City for the Christmas show. And she filled that bus in less than a week. So that will be one that we'll do next year because it was a successful program. We had how many, 100 and?
Well, we bought 50 tickets, but then
50
we actually
tickets.
had to buy additional
buy
tickets
extra.
because more
So many
people
people
wanted
signed
to
up.
come.
So
It was
that
a
will be
fun
one we'll
trip.
run it every year now, and we'll have the revenue offset on that as well, so.
Thank you.
Jason, to your point, for decades, the Parks and Rec has been self-funding with programs except for the pool, which we all recognize. So this continues the long tradition of all their activities and programs being not funded by taxpayers, but by the users.
Anything else of Megan?
I had a quick question for you. It looked like maintenance and operating costs keep going up incrementally. Looked like it was a pretty big jump between not that long ago. What's causing these increases? I mean, obviously inflation, obviously minimum wage increased, but
In
that still
operating
looks like a
expenses,
huge jump.
can we go to that slide?
Trying to look at the historical.
Yeah, the historicals for operating expenses, if you go back to 2019, it was 11 grand, then it jumps to 19, then to 20, then to 22, then to 25, then to 29.
Like, how did we get from 11 grand 5 years ago to now almost $30,000 in operating?
I think one of those expenses is credit card fees, and with MyRec, which is what we use for registration, the more income we take, the higher our fee is yearly, plus the credit card fees are predicted to go up about $5,000 alone this year. The more income we're taking, the higher our credit card fees are. I believe that's.
We also add more special events, which goes in activities, so we add more things every year, so different things like concerts and things like that are also included in that as well.
You look
Under-
puzzled.
Say again?
You look puzzled by that
Yeah,
answer.
no, it was a big jump for me, but, under, not to get into the nitty-gritty of it all, but like, essentially, what's going into the pool maintenance?
That's all the chemicals, the chlorine.
Did the price of those things go up that significantly in inflation?
They do go up yearly, but also I'm hoping that we need more chemicals because the pool's gonna get more use this year.
And
And
the
there
new-
may also be less chemicals because we're not leaking as much water.
And the new pool mechanicals are gonna be different, so how the chlorine is gonna be dropped into it's gonna be completely different.
Yeah.
So it might be slightly increased.
Yeah, it's a tablet system,
Yeah.
tablets
Yeah.
now.
It also looked like the splash pad was still included under the capital requests
Yeah,
as well.
what we did, Casey, is we moved that to infrastructure, And
Okay.
then what, if you look actually on the actual capital page, this is the departmental request.
Right.
Then we have the actual, we moved it from here to the capital page, and then from there, you'll see the progression to infrastructure. Because we had $186,000 in ARPA,
Yeah.
and the splash pad's probably gonna be double that, so we put the 360 in infrastructure and offset it with the ARPA funds.
So is that still gonna be included in this upcoming
It's in
year's budget
infrastructure,
then,
but I
or-
believe it's out 2 years or so. So there's the capital, so if you see splash
Oh, I
pad,
see, okay.
we moved it to infrastructure reserve.
Was the location for the splash pad decided already?
To be determined.
Well, it's not, I mean, how could you possibly have a number for it without
It's,
knowing where it's gonna
it's a
go?
rough estimate. We base it on, let's say Milford put in a splash pad, what they paid for it, so it's really, it's
Yeah.
just a rough guess on right now. We don't know.
Oh,
And I believe the Park and Rec Commission, Tim, do you know they have an actual splash pad committee that's looking at this?
They did. There's a couple people that are involved with it. John Deal is no longer, he put in his resignation. I think Andrew Spencer is one on the commission, or the committee, and Charlie Rosa.
Okay.
So, yeah, they were looking into actually the Milford splash pad that you referred to.
And Casey Blake, our public works director, has a ton of experience in this type of stuff, so he was giving us some information also on running a water line and putting a pad in, and logically Settlers, because we already have a pad there, might be the best place, but we're still looking, so it's still to be determined.
What about the ongoing costs year after year? Was that factored into the cost too,
We-
like maintenance?
We would put
and-
that back into the infrastructure budget for the maintenance of the splash pad,
Yeah,
and then we would put the general operating into Megan's budget.
okay.
I have a
We
question.
don't have an estimate of that, not yet, we don't.
So the pool cleaning doesn't include the splash pad cleaning?
It does
'Cause
not.
that would need chlorine as well, I would believe.
That
That's a-
would,
yeah,
yes.
a whole
It would
separate-
be,
And
it'd be a
that-
separate mechanical system.
So has that, a survey been done that this is something that the town needs? Is everyone on board with this?
It's my understanding that it was something they wanted before I came on board.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when we had the ARPA task force first met on projects that the town would want, Park and Rec came to us with pickleball and splash pad. The pickleball courts, we were done, they were easy to put in, we had a spot. Splash pad, we had to go through all the motions that we're going through now, so it was requested by the Park and Rec department at the time, Megan's predecessor.
So was this at the same time that the pool was being refurbished and
We,
and we're
we,
redoing the pool? Do we need a splash pad in the new pool?
One thing we looked at when building the pool was to do similar to Edgewood, where they have the water feature in the zero entry.
Uh-huh.
But when we went to the Board of Selectmen with that, the board decided that wasn't the best option. So we took that out. We just did the zero entry, and then we were gonna do a separate splash pad somewhere else.
Okay, so with just what you said, if you took that out of the pool, do we need the splash pad? And the maintenance and the costs and everything else? Are you gonna go? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's up to what the people of Southbury want.
Okay, so it still has to go up to a vote?
When we actually go out, like most of these major projects, it will go for a vote. It'll be a town meeting.
Okay. My other question is the pickleball at Community Park. Is that gonna be part of the redoing of the tennis courts, or is this a sole separate area?
Depending upon how FEMA reimburses us for those courts, we'll see what they will give us to replace those courts.
Otherwise, it'll be a separate area?
Otherwise, it'll be a separate area.
Okay.
Jeff and I were working with the USTA as far as getting a grant as well for those courts, so we'll see.
You could put 4 pickleball courts where 1 tennis court was. Yeah, so you could still have 2 tennis courts and add, it's a possibility.
Isn't it? You put the pickleball next to the existing tennis court.
Next to it, yeah.
Very popular at Valentine. It's busy all the time. Yeah, yeah.
Did we do, sorry. Did we do the same thing with the bicycle park as we did with the splash pad?
We,
then?
what we did with the bicycle park and the pickleball courts at Community House, we put it out a few years in as a capital request, so it won't be this year. Yeah, will not.
But if FEMA comes back, depending on what FEMA comes back with, it could be.
Could be, depending on what FEMA comes back at. We don't know, because unfortunately, the courts at Community Park were not post-tension courts. So it depends on what FEMA's gonna reimburse us for.
So it depends on what FEMA is willing to pay for, which is build back to the original condition versus build back with post-tension.
And post-tension is obviously better.
Post-tension is, so you understand, it's normally, years ago, we just pour a slab of concrete. As you know, your floors in your house, whatever, next thing you know, there's a crack. What they do is they pour concrete with cables in there. They cure a certain amount, and then they take that and they pull that to a certain pressure. It's the same thing on bridge slabs and construction, and they draw it tight. And they actually have a meter so they know how tight those cables are. The idea is that at all times, that tension is pulling that concrete together so it won't crack. And that's how we built the current pickleball courts, so that the concrete surfaces won't crack. The school is building post-tension on theirs. I think the ones they had were not post-tension.
If I might, for those of you who, can we go back to that capital request sheet? Because it can be sort of confusing. The first selectman is obliged to tell us about everyone's requests. Then he makes a judgment about, gee, we should put this in the infrastructure plan, we should put it in the capital plan, we should not do it at all, we should do it in future years. There's all sorts of judgments he and Dan will make about what to do. Eventually, though, the Board of Selectmen decides, do you agree? In not only in total, but as to each line item. You want to put it someplace else? Should we do it or not do it? But this is the first selectman and the fiscal office recommendation on how to deal with all the requests from all the departments.
So part of that, you know, as years go on, you know, this is a tough year. IBM's assessments are there. Grand list is flat. It's not really, but should there be a big development go in, such as commercial development, let's say down to exit 14 or other buildings up here, and there's more money on the grand list and more taxes coming in, and the budget's, you know, shows a flat budget, you could say, okay, we're gonna move those projects up and get them done.
We ask for every year, we just don't.
Anything else for Meg?
Is that Whibbit?
Yes.
I just really wanted to say Whibbit. Is that planned for this year too then, or is that just,
No, we didn't move it forward this year.
No, I didn't move that.
okay.
Only because we wanted to talk to our insurance just to see.
Yeah, part of that is risk. We talked to
Risk.
Some stuff sounds like a great idea, and then we get to talk to our insurance company, and
I imagine the bicycle park will probably fall in there somewhere too.
we'll see. Anything else? Thank you, Megan.
Okay, thank you.
Relatively painless. Who we have
All right.
next, Dan?
We have our happy electors.
I'm very excited.
First
Are
budget,
you
first
both
budget
coming up,
for
or-
Mary and Marie, yes.
What if I can't answer the question, Mary can?
No.
Well, I wanted to make sure we're duly represented by both parties here.
All right.
So you guys will realize the electors' budget, the primary increase is the state's mandate to early voting, which is, we did the math on it every which way, and we used to budget their salary of our electors for 2 days a week. To make it all work, we had to increase the budget to 3 days a week. We did the hour calculation based upon the additional service time needed and things like that, so That's the majority of this increase, is just what the state has put upon us that we have to do for next year and moving forward.
Frankly, there's nothing we can do about it.
Could you explain this, the certification number doubling, and is that every year it's gonna stay at that level, or what?
No, did you want to take this, or?
We are newly elected registrars, so we both
Could you
have
push, there you push the button. There we go.
We both have deputies who are not certified yet. And the state has a certification program so that everyone knows what they're doing. And if anything happens to a registrar, the deputy can step right in to take over. So we have two people who have to go through the training through UConn.
And it's $4,000 per person?
No, two.
Two.
Two per person, so.
Two, so we got 4 people going through the program.
No, we're
We're
already.
already certified.
We're already
It's just
certified.
the two new deputies.
The budget is $8,000 times, all right, is it $2,000 per year?
No,
for
the
4
only
peop-
other increase is we are required to have a certain number of certification hours for ourselves. So those conferences that we go to get those hours, there's an expense. I'm trying to think, it's $900 just for myself and my deputy to go to just the spring. Same for
Same
hers.
for me.
So that's going to happen again in the fall. And then there's also costs as far as us getting there and
Yeah,
staying
let's
there.
see. And this will be an ongoing every year?
Only for our continuing education. Once we're certified,
Yeah, they're,
we're certified as long as we keep our continuing education.
So the certification is one thing and the continuing it is another.
Yes.
correct.
How much of this 8,000 is certification one time, and how much of it is continuing ed for everybody?
Do you want to take this?
$4,000 is for the certification one time, $2,000 for each of the two new deputies.
Okay, so half of the, so the increase is to get the 2
That's it.
deputies certified, and that is a one-time expense.
Yes.
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 And the other 4,000 keeps everybody up once you're there.
And as long
Right,
as we,
because the
as-
deputies need that continuing education.
Understood.
units also.
and as long as we
Understood.
keep our deputies, because then it's going to cost another
certainly do.
$2,000.
Some,
Any questions for the registrars?
Can you talk about hourly rates and how successful are we in getting poll workers to meet all these new hourly needs?
Our hourly rates for the majority of the poll workers are a little above minimum wage. The people we pay more are the moderators, the head moderators, and the assistant registrars, because they have a lot more responsibility
But
in the elections, but they're paid what we want is a flat rate for them now, because their hours, it's hard for us to discern how many hours they're gonna need to get through something, so a flat rate, but we want the rate and the hourly pay to be good enough that we can get decent poll workers in, because if we can't, it'll be a nightmare.
I think it becomes a domino effect, but unfortunately, as of right now, we do pay our poll workers minimum wage. So, it's hard to get bodies in there for a 17-hour day to sit there and work for minimum wage. We do give them an evening meal. They're usually okay with that. But there's not a lot of wiggle room. Most of our budget went up because our hours, we have an additional up to 340 additional polling hours.
We have to adjust it up.
There's nothing we can do about that.
This budget was put in before.
We can't change early voting, so we're stuck with it until there's some type of change in the legislature on the hours.
what's the current minimum wage, or what's the minimum wage going to be during next fiscal year?
It's 1635 right now,
And when does it go up again?
usually in January.
January is usually when they.
It's tagged to
In
an
the mi-
index to increase every January. If the
So-
index goes up, it goes up with it.
So it seems like the $16 there is going to need to change as a budget matter to cover the rate during next year's elections, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
When we built this was in November, prior to the governor increasing in January, so
So will they have enough money to pay the poll workers?
we'll adjust it in the selectmen's budget, the difference between the two. So you'll see an adjustment to get it to the right amount.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Leading into that conversation, I think, and this is not unique to all 169 towns, poll workers getting help is always difficult. One of the other things in this budget, though, that gives me a little bit of pause is, you had mentioned the deputies who are now being certified. Every time, thanks to the folks running the state, increases our minimum wage, you get wage compression in the middle. The person who's been here 5, 6, 7 years, whose salary hasn't gone up commensurately. So if you look at the two deputies, they're making, if this is the correct number now, $18.52 an hour. So they're making a couple bucks more than minimum wage. And they are a heartbeat away from being in charge of our elections.
Yeah.
So it's not always the easiest to get, I think right now you guys have done a pretty good job, but that's always something I think that, maybe should be looked at, to, so the number 2 person in charge of our elections isn't necessarily making the same as, with all due respect, the guy bagging your groceries at ShopRite.
Yeah, what we did in January, which we're putting together the transfer right now, we did a compression based on minimum wage, so we just haven't had a chance to go to the board yet to have the transfer approved, but we did put it together from the HR department, what the compression would be and where we stop at what midpoint.
Ahead of me as usual. Thank you, Dan.
And anywhere there is an increase in our budget, it's all because the state has required us to do so. We're getting, excuse me, all new tabulators this year, and that's a lease agreement. So, the state decided how many tabulators we were going to get. So they decide the cost of what that maintenance fee is going to be every year. So we can't go back and negotiate and say, well, no, we want to pay $50 less a tabulator. They don't care. This is what the fee is, and you just go ask your fiscal if you run out of money. That's exactly what they tell us when we go on our Zoom calls.
Yep.
They literally tell us that.
Yeah,
I
they-
thought it
And
was,
the
I thought if we
cost for
ran
the
out of
new
money, we
tabulator.
just didn't give it to them.
We could try. We
And
could
they
try
shut 'em
that.
off?
Yeah, we should try that. Maybe they just won't catch it.
Let's try it.
The cost for maintaining these new tabulators is much higher than it was on the old ones. And we have a significant increase in the number of tabulators from what we have right now and what we will be getting sometime in the near future. But we don't have a date. We won't be having them for the referendum. I think the state certainly hopes we have
Every
them
year.
for November, but nobody's given us any date as to when we
The
might be
rumors
getting them.
is June, but usually the state is not on point, so.
And the state did roll out a grant for early election. We got, was it $6,000? But I think every municipality got $6,000. So Waterbury got $6,000, we got $6,000, Washington got $6,000. So it didn't really offset the cost of this all that much.
Okay. Anything else? No other questions? Thank you for coming
Thank
out.
you for having us.
We love having you here.
This was our first budget.
See you tomorrow.
Gets more exciting as the years
As
go
the years
by,
go
I can
by.
tell you that.
Next year it's going to be easier.
Shocking, the amount of people over here tonight.
That's what they keep telling me.
We've done at least 15 with the amount of people.
That never gets easy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else tonight?
Public safety tomorrow.
Public
Police,
safety.
fire. Emergency management.
Motion to adjourn? All in favor? Aye, we're adjourned.